Okay, I am going to play for you a Jordan Peterson, and for an odd reason, a reason I have no idea of, he is like really going hard at Candace Owens for some reason. I can't quite put my finger on it. So just listen to this, and I am going to tell you, I believe he is the sociopath he's talking about.
In the Gospels, Christ tells people to store up treasure in heaven where it doesn't rust, where the thieves can't steal it. That's reputational treasure. Right? So the idea is that if you conduct yourself impeccably, you'll develop a storehouse of reputation that will withstand all catastrophe. There's no place you can put your wealth that's more effective than that. It's the least violatable place, and that's right. It's right.
Right.
And so, but the problem is, and this is a really tricky problem, and you're touching on it, is that the reputation game can be gamed. Okay, so when your reputation rises, your serotonin levels rise, and that makes you less sensitive to negative emotion and more sensitive to positive emotion. So that's a really good deal. And what that also means is that there's a high psychological benefit to status increase, reputational increase, and a real cost to reputational decrease. So that's partly why people don't like losing face, for example, because their emotions dysregulate. Okay, so now the best way to play that game is to establish a genuine reputation.
Now, he goes on to say that apparently, so what's the way forward? The best way to play that game is to establish a genuine reputation, not a curated or performative reputation, but a real one, built one decision at a time. Now, before he says this, hang on a second. We are going to look at...
In the Gospels, Christ, I think that virtualization has enabled...
Now, hang on a second.
I think that virtualization has enabled the psychopaths.
Without a doubt.
Yeah, well...
Without a doubt.
That's a terrible thing, because the psychopathic types, they're always the death of everything. Like, I'm seeing this come up on the right now. So imagine this. I've been working on a new theory of political psychopathology, and I like it quite a lot.
Is this where the term the woke right comes in?
Yeah, well, Lindsay is pointing at that, but he hasn't got the diagnosis exactly right. So it isn't woke. That's not the issue. It's not exactly.
I think
one
what
level.
they're talking about is like similar types of behavior.
He is talking about that. Yeah, no.
But
what he's pointing.
Woke just lets you clarify in your head. Oh, it's like that.
Yeah, but the problem is
it's like Antifa.
Yeah, absolutely. But the problem is that argument is predicated on the claim that the ideas are the problem, like the woke ideas, for example, on the right or the left. But that's not the problem. The problem is that 4 to 5% of the population, something like that, is cluster B, that's the DSM-5 terms, histrionic, narcissistic, antisocial, psychopathic, or they have dark tetrad traits, they're Machiavellian, they're sadistic. That's about 4%. Okay, so the question is, how do these people maneuver? And the answer is they go to where the power is, and they adopt those ideas, and they put themselves even on the forefront of that.
Right.
But the ideas are completely irrelevant.
Right.
All they're doing is they're the Pharisees. They're the modern version of the Pharisees. They're the people who use God's name in vain, right? As they proclaim moral virtue.
Yes.
Doesn't matter whether it's right or left or Christian or Jewish or Islam. They invade the idea space, and then they use those ideas as false weapons to advance their narcissistic advantage.
Yes.
And so then you have the problem, and the right's going to face this more and more particularly, because the left had to face it when they were in powers.
Yes.
How do you identify the psychopathic parasites, 4% of the population, who are clothed in your clothing and waving your flags, but who are only in it for narcissistic benefit?
Okay, Guy, so that last few words there, how do you spot them? They're wearing your clothes and they're waving your flag. I assert that that's Jordan Peterson. That is Jordan Peterson. Why is he using Jesus as an example for anything? It's a legitimate question because he has this whole series on the Gospels. Jordan Peterson and the Gospels. What is that about? Is he born again? Is he a born again Christian? He isn't. He's the one wearing the clothes and waving the flag. Well, why is he invoking all of these biblical imagery? Like the whole thing about, he's talking about reputational treasure. No, he wasn't. That entire, the entire passage, Jesus wasn't talking about your reputation. He was talking about how you interact with God as opposed to interacting with men. And that interacting with God was more important. And so when you do your alms, you do it in private. When you do charity work, you do it in private. When you pray, you do it in private. When you fast, you do it in private. And then he says, he said here, because a lot of this stuff is you don't need to go to Bible college. Look at what this is, I believe, Matthew 6, starting at verse 19. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, where moth and rust destroy, where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroy, and where thieves do not break in and steal. And then here's the kicker. Why? Look at what that little word there, for. It's like saying because. Is that's what the for is there for? So because what? Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So the whole point of all of this stuff is Jesus saying to you, because where your treasure is, where your valuables are, where whatever you value, that's where your actual heart is. That's where your interest is. That's where the real you resides. He's not talking about reputation. He isn't. That's not to say that having a good reputation is bad. It's not. Having a good reputation is good. Having sound character is better. In fact, I will tell you that your reputation can be absolutely hacked. It happens all the time, and identity theft all the time. The whole Me Too movement, guys being accused of being monsters and they didn't do anything wrong. Yeah, you got guys being called out for being monsters because women are just, remember that the gal that she was in college and she said the lacrosse team pinned her down and did some horrible things to her. And then 10 years later, she comes out and says, I kind of made it up. That crap follows men. It happens all the time. The whole thing about your reputation, forget about that. What you should be concerned with is your character, who you are in the dark, who you are when no one is watching. That's what you should be concerned with. And so my whole point of doing this, I want to know why Jordan Peterson has this beef with Candace Owens saying Christ is king. Like, hang on a second, because I think I have that. Oh, I don't think I do. Oh man, hang on a second. Let's see here, because I think I had her. Yeah, here it is. She says something here. So this is what so she responds to this. Okay, she's responding to this. This is him on Hannity.
Well, I think the most important thing to do first is to draw a distinction between the political and the psychological and not to collapse them together. So imagine this. Imagine that there's a group of individuals, about 4% of the population, who have a set of personality characteristics that have been described as dark tetrad. So they're Machiavellian, they use their language to manipulate, they're narcissistic, they want unearned social status and reputation, they're psychopathic, which makes them free of empathy and parasitical and predatory, and they're sadistic. So they take positive delight in the unnecessary suffering of others. Now, those people also use false cries of victimization, let's say, to manipulate, and they're entitled. They seek vengeance when it's unwarranted, and they protest loudly and make very public cries for reparations that would be self-serving. Okay, now the way those people operate is they look for what patterns of belief form groups that they can infiltrate and then capitalize on. And that happens on the right. We did a report, the same group, on the use of Christ as king as a manipulative strategy by bad actors, hypothetically on the right. And this report identified the same sort of people on the left.
He's talking about Candace Owens. That's what he's talking about. He's talking about Candace Owens because she says Christ is king.
But it's not primarily political. They're wolves in sheep's clothing who look for where there's power and value and then adopt those beliefs as a surface camouflage so that they can elevate their moral status. Now, and this has become worse in recent years as far as I'm concerned, because the evolved strategies that we have for dealing with these psychopathic types, psychopathic narcissistic types, don't work well online. And so the psychopaths can get away with their terrible manipulations online, and they can find like-minded people, and they can escape from any reputational consequences. And so there's always been psychopaths. Those are the Pharisees, for example, that Christ points to, the religious pretenders. Those are the people who use God's name in vain and claim moral virtue and even religious devotion. Well, all they're doing is feathering their own nests and furthering their own narrow interests.
So this is on Sean Hannity. The other one was on Joe Rogan, in which he said basically the same thing, using the Pharisees. Now, the reason he's using the Pharisees is because he knows most people who are Christians know who the Pharisees are. For those of you who don't know, those are the hypocrites, the vipers. In modern terms, those are the bad actors. And it's interesting to me that he continues to use these New Testament terms like Pharisees, but he's not a born-again Christian. So why is he doing it? No. I mean, it's a legit question. You see, if I were to use it, I'm using it because I am a born-again Christian, and I'll tell you that. By the way, that doesn't mean that I'm perfect. And that brings me back to the first thing that he said. Like you have to, conduct yourself impeccably. Well, nobody can do that. You conduct yourself impeccably. Well, nobody can do that. In fact, that's the reason we come to Christ in the first place. Because we have an inability to get that done. So let's see, and hang on a second. So, man, this is getting really long. So this is what she says. This is indistinguishable from the time when the COVID experts produced baseless reports claiming that those who refused to get the vaccine or stay at home were extremists who suffered from psychopathic tendencies. Trust the experts, guys. Anyways, Christ is king. Now, this is just my assertion. He keeps invoking that Christ is king like somehow it's a bad thing. It's using it as like an anti-Semitic thing when you don't get to make that determination. Mr. Peterson, unless you're telling me that you know her heart. Because in my world, the only person, the only entity that actually knows the true heart of a man is God. So if you're telling me that you know exactly why she is saying that, Jesus is king, Christ is king, then you got to explain to me how you know that. Because mere mortals don't. Actually, I'm telling you, why is he invoking all of this biblical imagery? It's because he knows his audience. He's not a born-again Christian. He's never, as far as I'm concerned, at the time that I'm recording this, he has never professed Jesus as the Christ, God's only begotten son, raised from the dead, born of a virgin. That's never come to light. If he believes that, he has never said it. I gotta tell you, I actually have a real problem with this, because I guarantee you Christians are listening to him like somehow he's a pastor, like somehow he's some, Christian leader. He isn't. Jordan Peterson is not a Christian leader. And that he is using Christian imagery bugs me. Now, if he were to come out and say, you know what, I am a born-again Christian. I accepted Jesus Christ as my personal Lord and Savior. I did that. Okay. My guess is he ain't going to say it. The reason I believe he's guilty of exactly what he's calling out. The people who wave your flag and wear your clothes. That's exactly what he's doing. He's wearing our clothes and waving our flag as Christians. He is guilty of what he is saying. And he's doing it in your face. He is the hypocrite. Jordan is the sociopath. He is the wolf in sheep's clothing. So make of it what you will. As far as I'm concerned, my guess is there's a bunch of Christians that are going to follow it and wow, that sounds really profound. No, it wasn't. It's like Jesus says reputational. That's not talking about reputation. It's talking about your relationship with God. The treasuring, storing up treasure in heaven. That was talking about your relationship with God. And that it was more important than your relationship and your performative nonsense with men. Do what you do with God for God. And in other words, my pastor would say, live for an audience of one. I'm just telling you, that sounds like a whole bunch of gobbledygook clothed in Christianity. All right, I went really, really long on this, and I'm sorry for that. If you like this video, smash the like button, and if you're following me on Rumble, please press that follow button, and until the next time, God bless.